There you go. Never split the difference. Negotiating as if your life depended on it. By Chris Voss. You got to get this book right now. You have to. Do you have a wife? Do you have a husband? Do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a child? Do you have a employee of anybody? You trying to buy a house? You trying to get a car? Get the book. Never split the difference. And here's why you should get the book. All right. Now, first of all, I showed you that screen because I listen to it. I use audiobooks because I drive so much that I'm in my car and away from home that I don't really have time to sit down and read books as fast as I want to. So I listen to books on through Audible at like twice the speed. That way, like a 10-hour book is now a 5-hour book. That's so that's a little hack for you. Just speed it up. The first time you do it, it's going to sound like, but after a while, like anything else, you'll get used to it. So never split the difference. Look, if you have a wife, children, kids, anything, a plant, a dog, puppy, you got to read the book because the truth is this: everything is a negotiation, and that's what this book is about. But more importantly, it's about how to improve dialogue. How do you improve communication with a loved one, with a coworker, with a client, with your children? Because so many times, like when two people are arguing, it's because they both think that they're right, and neither one of them wants to give up their positioning. I mean, if you look at the Middle East, how long's that war been going on? They both need to read the book. If they just read the book, it'll be over. It'll be a wrap. It's done. People need to read. Because the in relationships, the problem isn't the problem. The problem is how you respond to the problem, how you handle the problem. That'll determine if when the next problem pops up, will it be as bad as the last time, right? So, for instance, a lot of times, like when we are in relationships, when we argue with someone or with a client, it's all about like, how do we argue about the dishes or trash or coming home late or whatever it is that determines the future success of the relationship, of the friendship. And even though this book isn't really talking about arguing, it is talking about how do you communicate with someone so that, and debate or negotiate with someone so that you both feel good at the end. Instead of what I think usually happens in a relationship is that one side feels obligated to do what the other person wants. Whether it's in terms of chores or financially or sexually or whatever it is. And most negotiations are like that. They end with one person getting what they want and then the other person feeling like they got nothing. And then resentment builds up and all of a sudden 10 years later, they get a divorce. And you're like, what? What happened? Or you lose your job or a client complains or what have you. So I'm going to give you like some of the tactical, applicable tactics that the book uses. My favorite, and I used this on my Uber driver the other day. He was just talking about like, how do you get a person to keep talking? Because I've always been fascinated by like great interviewers like Oprah Winfrey or other talk show hosts who just can talk to anybody. And I'm like, what are they doing? How do they do that? And why do people feel so comfortable around them? I've always, people say they feel like that around me, but I haven't been able to quantify it to know why people feel like that. And this book helped me break a couple things down. So one of the most important things, and this is really great in relationships, like if your partner is venting or somebody just needs to unload and you don't know how to handle it, because usually as a guy I want to recoil, is just repeat the last, excuse me, and you can do this at a party too. Like if it's one of those parties you really don't want to go to, but you're going because so think for your girlfriend's job or one of those holiday parties, and you're like, I don't know anybody, and how do I keep this conversation going? It gets awkward. Okay, let me get to it. So just repeat the last three things that the person said. The last three words of the whatever they've said. So like if your girlfriend comes home, she's like, "Oh my God, I had such a bad day." Then you go, "A bad day?" And then she'll hear that question in your head as if like you didn't understand or tell me more, and then she'll naturally just start telling you more. So you want to repeat the last three words someone says, uh, and in a question form, and then they'll continue to expand and expound. And I promise you, I was like, that sounds cheesy, corny. People will pick up on that. I did it for a half hour in the car with my Uber driver just to test it out. And I mean, he told me everything about his life. Everything. I know the dude's blood type. I know his social security number. Uh, I know what high school he went to, his childhood girl. Like basically, if I needed to hack into his email, social security, bank account, I'd probably know all the passwords. Is what I'm trying to tell you. So with that, also use labeling. So what labeling is, and he goes into much detail in the book, is like when a person's talking to you, like, "Oh my God, I had such a bad day," and it's like, "Oh, a bad day." And they go, "Yeah, it's like my boss was acting crazy and blah blah." Wow, it seems like you're a little upset about that. I am upset. So see how I labeled the emotion? It seems like, and the third thing I did. So the first thing I did was I repeated the last three words that they said. Then the second thing I did was I labeled the emotion. And then the third thing I did was instead of saying, "I think you're upset," or "I think this," or "I that," or I this, I said, "It sounds like," "It seems like," "It feels like." And what that does is, because if you use the word "I," then it sounds self-serving, like it's like somehow you're trying to make it about you or you're projecting. When you say when you use it, then it sounds like you're really listening to what's going on with them. And so I did all three of those things during the ride with my Uber driver, and I even did it with my because I personal train. And I even used it with my clients after I told them what the tactics were. Then I said, "Did you even realize I was using it on?" They're like, "Nope, didn't even realize." And so like even when people know you're doing it or even aware of the tactics, it's so natural and it flows so well. And is when I realize like when you watch Law and Order movies or detective movies, that's exactly what they use. They use these leading questions and just kind of repeat the last few things that you said, and it just keeps you talking. It's amazing. So that was great. The other thing the book talks about is no, how to say no without offending the other person. Because just to say no to someone, that's kind of jarring, right? It's like, did you feel that? Um, so instead of saying no, you say, "I'm sorry," and I know that there's like this movement for people to stop saying sorry, but in negotiations, just instead of saying no, say, "I'm sorry, but that just doesn't work for me," or "I'm sorry, but," or "How am I supposed to do that?" Somebody's like, "Yo, man, I need 30,000 from you by the end of the month." How am I supposed to do that? So what you're doing is with that question, you're putting it back on them to figure out how you're supposed to do that, because it actually makes them think like, "Wait, am I being unreasonable? Was that a crazy?" You're not saying you won't do it. You're just like, "How am I supposed to do that?" And not in a sarcastic way, but just in a genuinely like, "Help me understand how you think I'm supposed to do that," right? With given these parameters or whatever. And if they come back at you with something else, you just repeat it again. How am I supposed to do that? Very, very neutrally. But the book goes into so much more detail about it. But yeah, and because I know like a lot of people have a hard time saying no, so it's great that it gives you different ways of saying no. Another way they tell you to say no is say, "I'm afraid that doesn't work for me," or I'm sorry, I'm afraid I just can't. I can't. I'm afraid I just can't. So you're kind of like you're labeling and you're sharing an emotion like, I'm afraid I just can't. So those are ways to say no. Um, and then what was really cool about the book is he talked about the idea that we go into negotiations thinking everybody's logical and we're all rational beings. when really we're all very emotional. We're very emotional, very irrational. If you think about most of the decisions you've made, they've mostly been reactive. They've been emotional. They've been irrational. If you watch the stock market, um, people, a company has bad news on Tuesday, and the stock drops 20%, even though like it's not horrible news, or the company's not going under. It's just like, oh, they got a new CEO, stock plummets. One of the stores shut down, stock. It's just like, look at the big picture. People make very emotional. That's why when you go to a grocery store, they have all those little snacks right there on the counter. Stuff you would never buy, stuff you would never go in a grocery store for, is right there at the counter, because most people will make an impulse buy. They'll be like, oh, well, since I'm standing here, this looks good, I'll try this out. And boom. And they probably make like like 20% of their profits come from those impulse buys. Actually, I'm going to look that up because that's an interesting question. Um, the other key with negotiation is, and the reason why you want to ask those three questions to get people to talk more is, which I was talking about in the beginning, is because when people start negotiating, you're really trying to just uncover what's called the black swan. And the black swans are things that are the truly hidden motives behind their actions and behind their. It's like when somebody's selling a house. It's like, why are they selling the house? Are they selling it because they're just tired of the house and ready to move on, or do they need that money right now? Do they need that money right now to pay off some other houses because the government's after them? Well, in that case, you have more leverage. That's a black swan. And that's something that, unless you really dig deep and ask more questions and get them to share more, that you probably wouldn't uncover, because nobody's going to tell you that they really need to unload the house. They're just going to be like, oh, we're ready to sell. So in any negotiation, never go in making assumptions that this person wants this for this reason. There's always another layer that you have to peel back and get to. And I'm going to close with this. The really cool thing is, he talked about when you get compliance from somebody in a negotiation, listen for your right versus that's right. I got little notes. That's why you see my eyes looking off to the side. And what he means is, if you say you should do the dishes when you come home, and they go, you're right, that means that they don't agree with you. They're just saying you're right, and they're just trying to do a yes to like get this over with. But if they go, that's right, then that means they agree, and then you'll get compliance from that. So you're not looking to hear that you're right. You're looking to hear that that's right. Like they agree that this is the way the situation should be handled, and then you'll know that you'll get compliance. And to tack on to that is, a lot of times in negotiations, we're always looking for the yes. Like people to say yes a couple times. Like when you're trying to sell something, it's like, hey, you like getting a good night's sleep, right? Yes. You like sleeping in, right? Yes. You like making money? Yes. Like, instead of trying to get the yeses, get the nos. Try to figure out what their boundaries are. And then that way you know what they value. The nos will tell you more about a person than the yeses. So don't try to get the yeses. Go for the nos so you know what the boundaries are. And that's all a no is. It's just a boundary. It's not this deal is off the table. It's just letting you know, I can only go from here to here. And so now that you know those are the parameters, it gives you more leverage, because you know how to frame your negotiation in a way that makes you both feel like you're getting value from it. This is your boy Leo Flowers. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Please subscribe. Please rate it. Give it a like. Share it with 3 of your friends. And I'm going to be posting these like right now once a month. But maybe I'll be cranking it up, because I got other stuff. I got a podcast called Confessions of a Male Diary. So check that out. And you can follow me on Instagram at Leo Flowers 2000. It's your boy. Peace. Please leave a comment.